Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you to our judges for being here all day with us. Shelley Lucasiewicz from CPA Saskatchewan, Katie Lockhart from MCO, Nick Kochar from Refresh, Alana Cook from the Government of Saskatchewan, Kim McConnell from AdFarm, Michael Hoffart from Farm Credit Canada, Tiffany Stevenson from the Ministry of Agriculture, Mohammed Torshizi from the Department of Bioresource Policy, Business and Economics, and the College of Agriculture and Bioresources. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, the judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask the presenters their desired questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any given time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is also banned from any materials that bear the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. You guys can go whenever you're ready.
When I was 19 years old, I was put in charge of training and managing a sales team for TELUS. And as any employee would respond to a 19-year-old manager, nobody took me seriously. Everybody patronized me, turnover was high, sales were down. Ultimately, really nobody really cared about anything that I had to say. And then I realized I needed to change my tactic. And sometime later, I had a bit of an epiphany. I was doing everything wrong. I was giving people information without really inspiring people to action. And so the very next day, I went to my sales team and I told them, forget everything I said. Forget your sales target. Forget your script. Forget your pitch. I want you to go out there and make 3 friends. I want you to go out there and help 3 people. That was the day that we broke TELUS's daily standing sales record. Ultimately, when you look at the fact that 1 head of cabbage has more estrogen than 1,000 servings of beef, or the fact that you can produce 20% more beef with 11% less resources, who cares? Emotion is what drives people to action. It's emotion that's going to bring people to act upon their Canadian identity, to produce beef or to consume beef locally. Good afternoon, judges. Good afternoon, audience. My name is Tony Anthony. To my left is Anita, and right behind me is to my right is Alan, and behind me is Anita. We are AAA Consulting, and we are very excited to show you the way that we have come up with the way to inspire and move your consumer base.
Thanks, Tony. So let's start off with the issues we have identified today. So first, we recognize that there's a lack of consumer trust and awareness for Saskatchewan beef. The second one is that there are inconsistent health standards promoted by your organization as the Ministry of Agriculture here in Saskatchewan and your other restaurants such as A&W and Chipotle. And third of all, we see that your advertisements aren't very targeted. It's very informative, but it's not engaging for your target audience of consumers. So overall, we see that there is a mistrust. There isn't that trust of Saskatchewan beef as a whole. And this does disrupt your industry in terms of sales and in terms of consumption. So let's move on to the first issue. So what we see is, again, there is a lack of consumer awareness. Now, there is a misconception of hormones as a whole. Hormones are actually very natural in cows, though unlike this image of this cow, it does actually come from a cow itself. Hormones are very much ingrained in animals and humans as well. So there's a misconception that hormones are very unnatural. And next of all, we also see that a couple years ago, there was an outbreak of E. coli through XL Foods. And because of this, overall, people had a misconception that beef as a whole, whether it was from Alberta or Saskatchewan, was bad. And so this affected sales as a whole. And because of all this, we see that without trust, people don't consider beef as a whole, and consumption is then lowered. Now let's move on to our second issue. What we see to explain health consistencies is that, for example, A&W and Chipotle have 2 very successful campaigns to promote it: Better Beef and Food with Integrity. This very much related to their core audience of consumers who enjoy eating out, enjoy eating at fast foods. However, they don't have certification and they don't have standards that suggest what better beef means. What does that really mean? And so without that standard and that consistency, we see that your organization is promoting something very, very much different from what these big chain restaurants are promoting. And so there's a lot of confusion heading around this industry, and as a whole, trust can't be built. And finally, let's move on to our last issue. What we see is that your ads through, let's say, Alberta, and your current ads aren't very engaging. There's a lot of text, there might be a lot of images, but because there's so much going on in just one brochure or one flyer, it can be very overwhelming for someone who just wants that base level information. And with information, doesn't always come with engagement. And that's not what we want. We want to sell that story. We want to sell that social aspect, that emotional aspect that consumers want to be engaged with. And what we see here is something called the brand resonance period. So without salience, without that beautiful imagery, that judgment and perception that can relate to this, resonance can't be built. And we want to do that just for you. So without relevance, you can't target consumers. And without a target consumer, you can't build relevance. So let's look on to our key considerations. So with our strategy, we want to make sure, one, we're able to increase long-term brand awareness for your organization and what you're trying to promote for beef. It can't be short-term for sure. The second one is we want to establish a standard that can be recognized via Saskatchewan, via many other restaurants that everyone can understand plain and simply. Last but not least, we want to build that effective targeting. We want to build that consumer base that you can fully target with an advertisement that resonates with them. So let's move on to our alternatives. Our first one here is that we want to lower your horns. What do we mean by that? I know it sounds kind of confusing, but in that case, we're going to counterattack that messaging that restaurants are putting out there. For example, better beef, food with integrity. Hormones aren't bad for you, but by not putting hormones in their foods like A&W has, it's suggesting to the public as a whole that hormones shouldn't be put in there. But however, it doesn't establish that standard. There's still a conflicting message, and that is the main reason why we're not going to go with this option. Now let's move on to our second alternative. Here we're going to hold your guard, taking a very defensive mode. And what does this mean is we're going to pick a key insight, something that's really relatable to consumers, and drive that awareness for them. By not using multiple insights and not cluttering them with a bunch of information, this can build slightly more relevance. However, awareness is still an issue. Education and information has been your forefront of advertisement, and this hasn't been working successfully. So we decided not to go with this option as well. Rather, we have one strategy that's going to take you to the home run, which is what we call brand your cows. This is basically creating a brand for your organization, for your beef, almost like what Alberta does with I Love Alberta Beef. So we want to promote that for Saskatchewan and build beef for you guys that will make it stand out within Saskatchewan and hopefully for the rest of Canada as well.
Thanks, Anita. So what the diagram here shows in front of you is a flip of the traditional marketing model that everyone here is really familiar with. I mean, you know that you hired us to really educate your consumer base and to potential employees and entrepreneurs that might want to get involved in this industry. But as we found out earlier through my experience, just the simple education part does not work. Education does build that awareness. It does give consideration, and a smaller proportion of who it affects do have that intent to purchase. But ultimately, it's the brand behind what it is that you are advertising, what it is that you're marketing, that builds that support, loyalty, and ultimately advocacy, which ultimately turns a good marketing strategy into a great one. So, just to go on further, again, we want to remind you that our strategy is beyond just a simple advertising campaign. It is a branding campaign as well as an advertising campaign. And what that will do is increase the awareness and consideration and intent to purchase Saskatchewan beef, not only in the short run, but also in a sustainable, long-run way. And so, first of all, we want to define who is the target consumer. What is the consumer profile? So I want to introduce to you Steve the Saskatchewanian. So Steve is 19 years old, and he is from Dog River. Since he's 19 years old, he is considered a millennial. He is very health conscious, he's on a student budget, and currently attending the University of in Saskatchewan somewhere. And his family owns horses, and he's an experienced equestrian that loves animals, and animal equity and fair treatment to animals is very important to him. That resonates with him. He's living independently for the first time, living away from home, and he is the primary person that everyone gives money to while he goes grocery shopping. So ultimately, when we target Steve, the Saskatchewanian, the targeted consumer means that you can better target your advertising. Ultimately, in terms of how you want to brand that message, is to create some sort of a logo, something that resonates with the people here in Saskatchewan. So we've come up with one here for you. The fact that it's green really shows that this is patriotic, that this is local to Saskatchewan. We have a symbol of a wheat going across the stake, and that shows that this is a very healthy, it's an affordable, ethical Saskatchewanian beef. So building and promoting a brand will ultimately resonate with that target market and really stand out to future entrepreneurs as well as employees. To go on further, the key messages that you want to implement in your advertising campaign is these following. The fact that it is CFIA approved. The fact that the cost savings are passed down to consumers. The fact that the cows are treated nicely. The fact that hormones create less fat for the cows. And the fact that it's more environmentally sustainable as you're using less land. And so the best media channels that we have identified for you includes radio ads, an online campaign, a sponsorship with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, a bus wrap, as well as a billboard. So to go on to explain what a radio ad would look like. Meet Bessie the cow. Bessie is a happy cow. Bessie is a CFIA approved cow, and Bessie has less fat than a normal cow because she has more room to exercise. And ultimately, Bessie is an environmentally sustainable cow. Why? Because Bessie was born and raised in Saskatchewan. Please consider CFIA approved Canadian prairie meat the next time you go shopping at your local grocer.
So now I'm going to talk about how we're going to really drive, now that we've reached out and we've really interacted with all these consumers, how we're going to drive further education. And that's where the Brand Hub is going to come in. Now the Brand Hub is an interactive website that will feature a careers section for people who might be interested in working in agriculture in Saskatchewan. It will feature your mission. It will also feature your partners, as well as it will feature your partners, your certification, and really straightforward what that is to really dispel any perception of otherwise. And lastly, it will really show you how to learn more. This will really build back into the education factor. It will have some interactive videos, as well as a chat board where people can really post and ask questions and interact with the brand. So overall, the website will serve as the brand's long-term hub, much after the advertising campaign has been aired. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. So in your brief, you spoke to us about aligning with a spokesperson. Really what we thought, why have a spokesperson when you can have a spokes team? And in Saskatchewan, that team is the Rough Riders. So really what we have done is what will happen from this partnership will be a brand spillover. We believe that you have very similar target audiences, males who, let's face it, like eating meat, as well as that it's much lower risk than aligning with a spokesperson. And will also be more long-term, as I don't think the Rough Riders are going anywhere anytime soon. So now I'm just going to justify our selection of the different mediums. So what we've done here is we have estimated the various reach by medium, then calculated out your cost per reach, and then lastly estimated the resonance. Now, we found it difficult to find a conversion measure, so what we have decided to go with is resonance. This is how much they're going to remember about your brand, about Saskatchewan beef. So really what we have done is we have selected the ones that have a low cost and high resonance. We've decided not to go with TV, as it is very, very high cost and will run around $200,000 per ad. Given the budget for the campaign, it is simply not feasible. We've also selected not to go with magazines, as although these do actually have a fairly high resonance, we find that they're also very, very expensive and also somewhat hard to target to your target demographic of an 18 to 30-year-old. Overall, we have aligned on newspapers, radio, outdoor, online, bus wraps, as well as the Rough Riders sponsorship. Overall, we think that the campaign will fit within your budget of $500,000. We have estimated out the cost of the various aspects, And as you can see, there is a surplus in your budget. Now, what we suggest you do if this surplus is doing the 3-month campaign in market period, simply add it to the medians that are working very, very effectively. If, for instance, your online social media is working very, very effectively, we suggest that you top that budget up and continue to drive that median. Overall, we think that there will be a bit of costs on the content development, which we have factored into all those prices. And we think that also the brand copy will cost around $20,000 additionally.
So this is what your implementation timeline is going to look like. What we have is a strategy laid out for you that's going to take a course and take formation over the course of 6 months. So we have divided that into 3 phases, as you can see. First is the preparation phase, then the execution phase, as well as the monitoring phase. In terms of preparation, you want to first of all build that logo and craft a marketing message that you really want to deliver, and we estimate that should take roughly about 2 months. Afterwards, you want to contact the ad agencies that will be responsible for the creatives that goes up on the billboards, that goes up on the buses. And we figure that these ad agencies, to provide a brief, to provide the full strategy, will take roughly about 2 months. That's a lot less than what it would take with the TV, mind you. Also, the fact that you want to be speaking with the Rough Riders and get into negotiations in terms of what's a sponsorship going to look like. Secondly, in terms of the execution phase, you want to launch the campaign as soon as those marketing messages are finished being prepared. After you've launched that campaign, the campaign will run for roughly 3 months, as most of the cost that we have estimated is for that time frame. After somewhere in the middle of 3 months, we know that the preseason for the Rough Riders begins middle of April. And so right in the middle of April is we figure that you will be finished talking and negotiating sponsorship contracts with them, and that's where you'll be sponsoring Saskatchewan Beef and partnering with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders in that period of time. The final phase that we have for you is to really monitor what is the impact that your campaign is having on everybody. And so the first is to create free association surveys. Again, we want to remind that this is beyond just an advertising campaign, that this is an advertising and a branding campaign. And so the free association that your consumers and your target segment has with that brand is a very key component that you want to be able to monitor. Secondly, you want to monitor that Rough Riders negotiation. This is new territory of the fact that food is partnering with a football team. And so you want to make sure that all relationships are good, that there is consistency and that there is alignment in the type of messaging that you want to bring across to your target market. And overall, we do believe that this is a very synergistic and a beneficial partnership to have. And even though there may not be many conflicts between the two parties, we do want to make sure that that is being consistently monitored. And lastly, we want to launch the survey for the target demographics as soon as a campaign is launched. We want to know exactly what that brand association is upon the launch of the campaign to make sure that whatever messaging needs to be adjusted can be adjusted in a timely way over the course of this 3 months.
Thanks, Tony. Now, despite the fact that we're able to connect with your consumer base using traditional and online technological platforms to do so, and build prosperity for your Ministry of Agriculture organization, we recognize that there are risks that we need to mitigate. So the first risk that we've outlined is that the brand and certification doesn't stick. Branding is always very difficult. Repositioning is also very, very difficult. And not everyone will resonate with this. Beef is a commodity as a whole, and therefore branding it is going to take a long time. So when we see that, yes, there is a probability that it won't stick, yes, it might have a somewhat big impact, but we see that there is opportunities for partnership, let's say with Alberta Beef, in which they have a very strong brand to work off of as well. And the other risk that we recognize is that the sponsorship with the Rough Riders doesn't work out well. The Rough Riders is a big organization and they have a big name to build. So do they want to partner with the Ministry of Agriculture with Saskatchewan Beef is up for question. However, we see that there is opportunity to align with other teams in Saskatchewan or other organizations that do resonate with your message of building sustainable action.
Do you remember the campaign that Alberta Beef had? I heart Alberta beef, with the province and the picture of the cow. Now tell me love isn't some sort of emotion. Tell me that love isn't what is driving people to be loyal to that branding. So ultimately, what we really want to enforce is the fact that emotions, the brand, the perception behind what the message is that you're trying to communicate, that will go further in terms of educating your consumer base. That will go further in terms of attracting potential entrepreneurs, attracting potential employees to the agriculture industry. So ultimately, as victorious warriors win first, then go into battle, while defeated warriors go into battle first and then seek to win. Well, we believe that our strategy for you is a winning strategy. As long as you know exactly what sort of emotions you're running into and what sort of influence that you can have upon them, we know and we can guarantee that you will be successful going into the future. Thank you very much. And we would now like to open up the floor for any questions you might have. Thank you.
So I'll ask my quick question. So before we can influence the lion's share of those Saskatchewanians, we must first influence a handful of those Saskatchewanians, to which they will then willingly share and become advocates and ultimately brand fans of this campaign. In a sentence, what then is that key message that if we leverage the winning first, what is that message, and why will that core group believe it?
Yes, your message is healthy, affordable, equitable Saskatchewan beef, in one sentence.
Why will they believe it?
I think they will believe it given the transparency that you will really lead the industry in showing them. I think that it is possible to really get a province behind its beef. We saw so in Alberta with the I Heart Alberta Beef campaign. I really think showcasing really every step of the process on our website, as well as showcasing that throughout our advertisements, will really make it credible, as well as aligning with one of Saskatchewan's largest sports franchise.
So building on Nick's question, you said earlier we wanted to sell a story. Do we really want to sell a story, or do we want to be recognized as a source of truth?
What I believe is storytelling is from relationship building. And relationship building means trust. And overall, we see that with a story, you can build that credibility through trust. It's something that resonates with others. And therefore, I don't see there being a trade-off. Rather, it comes together. You can share information, and that sounds very credible. But if it doesn't relate to the audience, there's no point, because it's not going to spread. Rather, if a story, they can resonate with it, they can relate to it, and therefore, trust can be built. And this is what ultimately the goal is for this campaign.
What's going to make me as a millennial want to go to your website and check things out and get involved in your campaign? What's going to entice me to really want to become a loyal advocate of this new message?
Absolutely. So the different media channels that we have listed for you, going all the way from the fact that there is a website, that there is a partnership with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, we want this to be an integrated marketing campaign. So one sort of media source will have a connection to the other sort of media source. While we didn't have the full amount of time to completely branch out every single connection that one media channel will have with another, it is important and absolutely crucial that your media channels are aligned and that they are connected and that they ultimately encourage the same call to action.
And what is that call to action? What's going to drive you to come and check things out, I guess?
Well, the call to action is to purchase Saskatchewan beef the next time you go grocery shopping. And what is going to drive that is those key messages that we have outlined for you earlier. The fact that it is cost savings, that it is ethical, that it is less fat, that it is environmentally sustainable, and it is regulated by a government agency.
So how are you going to take those key messages, which are quite technical, and turn them into stories through your tools like a bus wrap, for example? How are you going to make that transition and those linkages?
Well, I really think, I'm glad you touched upon the bus wrap, because there's really a lot of opportunities there. It's a really underutilized medium. So really what's failed in the past, and what you can see by looking at Alberta's campaigns, is really, yeah, they have not sold those messages in a very attention-grabbing way. So for the bus wrap, what we would perhaps suggest is, making the bus look like a bull, putting some bull horns on it, first getting attention, then then passing along that message after you've already acquired their attention.
Have you guys considered the local message, as far as like in 2 or 3 words that someone can see on a bus? Do you have a suggestion of where you go with that?
Yeah, I think once again, it's really emphasizing your value proposition, which is healthy, affordable, equitable, Alberta, or Saskatchewan beef rather. See, the Alberta campaign was so effective.
Just one of the wonderful, you're holding back some funds and then suggesting that we would target that towards areas of the campaign that are doing well. One thing you didn't discuss was the measures that would tell me what's working and what's not.
Absolutely. So one of the measures, the key measure that you want to really review is the fact that is the survey that you had previously gone and done through the government agency. So we want to see that the impressions that people have are changing. So the fact that Canada produces healthier beef, we want to see more people believe that that is the true case through that survey. The fact that Canada really cares about changing the regulations or managing any sort of change that people might face, we really want to make sure that those are the key metrics highlighted in the surveys that are being influenced by this campaign.